All right. Now just a little bit of background again, because it's been a while since we've been up here, talking about John. Try to remember where we left off. Keep in mind, the book of John is very different than the other Gospels. The other Gospels describe Jesus bouncing around to different places around Israel. Okay? John focuses on Jesus in Jerusalem, and a lot of times it's his interactions with the Pharisees. It's as though John, every time the Pharisees came by and Jesus got ready for a confrontation, John would whip out his notebook and say, okay, this is what happened, blow by blow. Okay? So it's important to keep that in mind. Now, what we've seen so far is that what is the main reason the Pharisees are using to say that, we don't accept you, we hate you, we want you dead. What is his number one thing that really bothers them about him? What's the crime that they want to execute him for right now?
He says he's the Messiah.
Well, there is that, but there is a particular one that gets their back up every time. And that's the thing they cite for his major crime.
Lazarus?
Well, he hasn't healed him yet, because we just finished chapter 8, so Lazarus comes later. Well, blasphemy, okay, you would be right, because we just finished John chapter 8, and they were ready to stone him for that. So you know what? Bad question on my part, because you are correct. It was blasphemy. It was claiming to be God. So, those are not exclusive. What I was referring to is just before John chapter 8, I should say. It was healing on the Sabbath. Healing on the Sabbath. That's doing work on the Sabbath, but it's actually a capital offense. Okay? All right? And he healed people on the Sabbath, and that set him off. And it's like, no, you can't be the Messiah if you heal on the Sabbath. No person from God would break a cardinal rule. All right? So that's their main thing. Okay? So when he comes to Jerusalem, the last time he was in Jerusalem, that was the big reason that they wanted him gone. That's why they wanted to execute him, was for healing people on the Sabbath. Now, so far, he's done it 2 or 3 times. And every time he does it, they have a cow. All right? So that's where we're leaving off. He's still in Jerusalem, and now we enter into his encounter with this blind man. All right, so let's get into it. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who'd been blind from birth. "Teacher," his disciples asked him, "why was this man born blind? Was it a result of his own sins or those of his parents?" Now, before I read the Old Testament, before I became a physician many years ago, when I first read this as an undergraduate, my response to that question was, what are you talking about? What? Was it his sin or his parents? The dude is blind. Why does it have to be somebody's fault, for one thing? And what the heck? What is this about? His parents sinned, and so you're going to make the kid blind? This was a completely weird concept to me. It's like, that didn't make any sense at all. Why would you even ask that? Why would you ask such a silly question? Well, turns out they had a valid reason for asking that question, because in the Old Testament there are some passages that relate to this idea. Here we go in Deuteronomy 5, 9 through 10. "I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, and on the 3rd and 4th generations of those who hate me, but showing loving kindness to thousands of generations to those who love me and keep my commandments." I was like, whoa. That's Old Testament, yes.
So, isn't that kind of like, once you get into the New Testament, it's kind of awesome?
Okay, once you get into the New Testament, does that negate all the Old Testament? Not necessarily. Okay, it doesn't necessarily. Now, there are some things that are modified, but I wouldn't use such a strong word as negate. Now, the question is, what does God mean here, though? Okay, because what is he saying? And how we interpret that is very important. Do you mean to say that if I commit a really bad sin, that my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren are going to be punished for what I did, no matter what they do? If that's the interpretation, that's not correct. Okay? So let's go on. Deuteronomy 24:16. "Fathers shall not be put to death for their sons, nor shall sons be put to death for their fathers. Everyone shall be put to death for his own sin." Okay? So here we go. Don't be punishing. If dad did something really bad, don't punish the kids. Everybody individually, you're going to be treated according to your own behaviors. So which is it? Which is it? That seems contradictory. And it is contradictory if we take the interpretation that what he was talking about was punishing the children for the sins of their parents, no matter what the kids do. Now, I think in Exodus 25-6 is something similar. It says, I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, on the third and fourth generations of those who hate me. And I think what's important to keep in mind is that this is ongoing hateful behavior on the part of the progeny. So it's not that the children who are getting... See, the thing is, we learn bad things from our parents. It's not unusual. If you have a parent that was having affairs, for example, when you were growing up, then you're kind of more likely to do that yourself. All right? We tend to copy, especially bad behaviors. See, good behaviors are more difficult to pass along. Bad behaviors are easy to pass along because they're easy. They're natural. And so when you have that example, and you can do it, and you don't have to worry about being shamed by your family because it's already a tradition. See what I'm saying? So if you continue that pattern, then you are going to be getting the same judgment that your parents did if you continue to do that same generational sin. The other reason why this question was probably asked is that by experience, they saw that if you have a promiscuous parent, very often their children were born blind. Okay? Before the age of penicillin, that happened. And it was because of a little spirochete, that little microorganism called syphilis. Okay? What would happen is if you had a mom that was infected with syphilis, as the baby passed through the birth canal, those organisms crawl into the kid's mucous membranes, and boom, this is what you get. Okay? And back then, they did not have a separate word for syphilis and leprosy. So it was all leprosy to them. Okay? And very often, because it hit the mucous membranes, neurosyphilis became ocular syphilis and affected the eyes. So there were many blind people that were blind because their mother was promiscuous. Okay? So they looked at that and they were going, whoa, this guy's blind. Now here, the thing is that when you have that mentality, that people that are blind, people that are deformed, are that way because of their parents' sin or their sin, then the attitude towards the disabled is, I don't have to give you anything because you deserve it. It's kind of like karma in Eastern religions. You have you're a disability, you're blind, you must have really screwed up in your previous life. Therefore, being kind to you, I'm not obligated to be kind to you. You're getting what you deserve. All right? So the question the disciples want to know, and clearly this is something that obviously before Jesus came along, when they saw a blind person, in their mind they're going, somebody's saying, too bad, somebody messed up, or this person wouldn't be blind. That's God getting even for sins. And so the question is, what's going on, Jesus? You're from God, so you should probably know the answer to this. Here's an opportunity for you to answer the question that we've all been wondering. And Jesus answered, it was not because of his sins or his parents' sins, Jesus answered. He was born blind so the power of God could be seen in him. Okay, so he makes it clear. This particular case, this case is for demonstration purposes. Okay, this case is for demonstration purposes. God wants to do something here. That's the only reason this guy is blind. All of us must quickly carry out the task assigned us by the one who sent me, because there is little time left before the night falls and all work comes to an end. But while I'm still here in the world, I am the light of the world. There's a lot packed into that sentence. It's very true. Life is very short. It's very, very short. And you feel the shortness of it the older you get. With each decade, it feels like it goes by twice as fast as the previous decade. Your 30s go by half as fast as your 40s, okay? And your 50s go by twice as fast as your 40s, and you can feel that. And so Jesus is kind of saying, hey, while you're here, get busy. Do some stuff, because it's going to be over quick. And he says, that's what I'm going to do. While I'm here, I'm the light of the world, and I'm going to show y'all some light right now through this blind guy. Okay? Then he spit on the ground, made some mud with his saliva, and smoothed the mud over the blind man's eyes. He told him, go and wash in the pool of Siloam. When I first read that, I'm thinking, Jesus, the dude is blind. How's he supposed to find the pool of Siloam? Okay? That was my first thought. I figured somebody probably had to show him, because that would be a rather hard thing to do. Okay? So the man went and washed and came back seeing. Now, the last time we saw something like this in the Old Testament, there was a particular general, and he came to visit one of the prophets, like Elijah or Elisha, I forgot which one, and he had leprosy. And he came all the way from his country to see the prophet, and the prophet came to the door and says, okay, go wash in the Jordan River and your leprosy will go. And the guy said, what? We got plenty of rivers in Syria I could have washed in. You made me come all this way? Dude. He was really miffed. He's ready to go home. And his servant says, what do you got to lose? Seriously, do it. What do you got to lose? So the guy did it, washed, and his leprosy left. And so that's the last time any Israelite had heard of somebody washing and having their disease go away. So Jesus did something unique by spitting on his eyes, or putting that mud spit in his eyes and sending him off. And so he only did that one time. What the significance of that was, did he have special antibodies in there that killed? I have no idea. So the guy came back seeing. Now, it's important to mention here that this is impossible. Okay? Some miracles, like if somebody thinks they're dead or their heart really gets slowed down, you might mistake them for dead, and so bringing them back, if it's only been a few hours or so, it could be natural. Okay? There are some things like that. Some people have psychosomatic illnesses, and you can heal them if they think they're healed. And so there are a lot of faith healers take advantage of that, for example. However, when it comes to being born blind, that's impossible. Medically, scientifically, that is absolutely impossible. The reason is this. When you are a baby, in order for your eyes to develop properly, you need visual stimulation during those first few weeks. It's absolutely essential that when you open your eyes, there be visual signals going into your brain. That causes your occipital cortex, your visual cortex, to form and make sense of the world. If you do not see during those first few weeks, you will be blind for life. Even if your eyes are perfectly good, you may as well donate them, because they're going to be worthless. If your brain does not get that stimulation in those first weeks, your brain will not be adapted for visualization. So this guy's born blind. His brain in no way is able to receive visual signals. So even if his eyes were healed, his brain is never going to be able to interpret that data. He does not have the connections. So in order for that to happen, both his brain would have to be rewired and his eyes fixed. Now the problem is, if this was syphilitic, he doesn't even have any eyes. so he would have to grow new eyes. I mean, this is just an incredible thing. I mean, really, the magnitude. I want you to understand, the magnitude of this is it's like growing a limb, growing two limbs, because you have to grow new brain tissue and new eye tissue. So this is an astounding miracle. It really is. This is an absolutely astounding miracle that is uncategorically miraculous. His neighbors and others who knew him as a blind beggar asked each other, "Is this the same man, that beggar?" Some said he was, and others said, "No, but he sure looks like him." And the beggar kept saying, "I am the man, it's me, I'm the same dude. Yes, remember you gave me $50 last week, remember?" Okay, can I have another 50? They asked, "Who healed you? What happened?" He told them, "The man they called Jesus made some mud, smoothed it over my eyes, and told me, go to the pool of Siloam and wash off the mud. I went and washed, now I can see." "Where is he now?" they asked. "I don't know," he replied. It's like I saw where he went. He put the mud on my eyes. I was blind at the time. Was he living like, oh no. Yeah, exactly, yeah. Then they took the man to the Pharisees. Why did they do that? Why did they take the man to the Pharisees? Old Testament law. You get healed, you got to show yourself to the priest. That's law, okay? So they had to take him. You got healed. That's a miraculous thing. Go show yourself to the priest. And that's what they did. Took him to the Pharisees. Now, Pharisees they weren't expecting this. That was like, whoa, this hasn't happened before. All right? Now, as it happened, well, except for Jesus, because it has happened before. That's why they were mad at him, because he was always doing it on the Sabbath. Okay, all right. Now, as it happened, Jesus had healed the man on a Sabbath. Again. Okay. The Pharisees asked the man all about it. So he told them, he smoothed some mud over my eyes, and when it was washed away, I could see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man, Jesus, is not from God, for he is working on the Sabbath. Others said, how could an ordinary sinner do such miraculous signs? So there was a deep division of opinion among them. And see, this is, it's really easy to see. This guy here, this guy, that's the one that says, I don't know. You see it on his face. Maybe he is the guy. Anyway, then the Pharisees once again questioned the man who'd been blind and demanded, this man who opened your eyes, who do you say he is? The man replied, I think he must be a prophet. The Jewish leaders wouldn't believe he'd been blind. So they called in his parents. They asked him, is this your son? Was he born blind? If so, how can he see? His parents replied, we know this is our son and that he was born blind, but we don't know how he can see or who healed him. He's old enough to speak for himself. Ask him. They said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders, who had announced that anyone saying Jesus was the Messiah would be expelled from the synagogue. That's why they said, he's old enough to speak for himself. Ask him.
Okay, so they're mad at Jesus because he does these miracles on the Sabbath.
On the Sabbath.
But could it also be a little humorous on their side? Because they are the leaders, and they are the ones that everybody's supposed to look to.
Very much so. Yes. That actually comes out later, actually. They actually say something to that effect. And after he heals Lazarus, he says, the Romans are going to come and take authority away from us. Okay? And because of him. And the other thing is, if you're the Messiah, we should be your lieutenants, not these rabble, not these low-class people. The low-born people should not be your disciples. We should be included. Okay? And exactly. And so you're coming and you're bypassing the high-born of society, and that is completely wrong. So we need a reason that you're not the Messiah. Because if you're the Messiah, that makes us look bad. Okay?
But healing isn't really a work.
They thought it was. They thought it was. Jesus could have said, it's no work at all, really. I didn't do it, God did it. The Father did it. He could have said, he didn't even address that, though. So, but they thought it was work. They thought it was work. So that's how they interpreted it. So, anyway. Yeah. So for the second time, they called in the man who'd been blind and told him, give glory to God by telling the truth, because we know Jesus is a sinner. So we want to hear a truth that doesn't involve him being the Messiah, because this guy's a sinner. So reframe your story now. We want you to reframe that. Now that you know that he's a sinner, reframe what you think. I don't know whether he's a sinner, the man replied, but I know this. I was blind and now I can see. Now here, I was tempted to bring out the West on this, but it's a lot. But I'm just going to say this right now. In the West, when you take a look at the strength, what this guy was saying, it says, I'm not sure if he's a sinner. I'm unsure about that. But I know this, absolutely. I was blind, and I can see now. That I know for doggone sure, okay? So he made it clear. This is a certainty. So am I certain about him being a sinner? No, but I'm certain about this, and that's what I'm telling you. But what did he do, they asked. How did he heal you? Look, the man said, I told you once, didn't you listen? Why do you want to hear it again? You want to become his disciples too? Then they cursed him and said, you are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know God spoke to Moses, but for this man, we don't know anything about him. Why, that's very strange, the man replied. He healed my eyes, and yet you don't know anything about him. Well, God doesn't listen to sinners, but he is ready to hear those who worship him and do his will. Never since the world began has anyone been able to open the eyes of someone born blind. If this man were not from God, he couldn't do it. So it tells you, this guy is blind, but he's not stupid. Okay? I mean, he's speaking kind of eloquent for a beggar. If you think about it, think about his logic here. I mean, he's been listening. He's been, somehow his parents have been teaching him or whatever. But this guy is pretty educated. And he's got, and he's getting kind of sassy. Here these Pharisees are and everything. And he's like, he's like, look, I mean, he's really sassing them here. And he's just a beggar. Okay, so they're going to be indignant about that. All right, he doesn't care. He doesn't care. I mean, he's all in, and you see his faith right there. He says, this guy, whatever he is, I believe, because there's no way. And he's actually giving credit to God right here. He's saying, if this is a God thing, I know this is a God thing. If this isn't a God thing, nothing is. You were born in sin, they answered. So what are they doing? What are they referring to? Yep. Is it because you sinned or your parents sinned, so you were born in sin? And I learned on Friday from one of my friends who goes to Messianic Jewish church thing there, that according to some of the rabbinical writings, fetuses can sin. Okay, so it is possible. I mean, according to this, not in the Bible, but some of the rabbinical teachings do say that you can sin in utero. Now, I didn't check on it. I'm just going by somebody else's word, but that's kind of messed up if you ask me. I don't know how a fetus could sin. All right, you're supposed to stay on the right side. Don't swim to the left. I don't know. I mean, what can you do as a fetus? You were born in sin, they answered. Are you trying to teach us? And they threw him out of the synagogue. All right. When Jesus heard what had happened, he found the man and said, do you believe in the Son of Man? Okay? Now, in the Old Testament, and even in the New Testament, mostly in the Old Testament, I should say, the Son of Man, that particular phrase is used many times. Most of the time, when it is used, it refers to a human. It's a humble term for, I'm just a human, I'm just flesh and blood. Many of the prophets call themselves Son of Man. They say that the angel spoke to the Son of Man or whatever, and they're talking about themselves. And it's a humbling term. It means I'm just a human in contrast to angels or to God. Now, there is one reference to the Son of Man which is clearly messianic. Absolutely, clearly messianic. All right? And this is the Son of Man that Jesus is referring to here. He's not talking about, do you believe in humans? He's saying, do you believe in that Son of Man? The man answered, who is he, sir? Because I'd like to. You have seen him, Jesus said, and he is speaking to you. Yes, Lord, the man said, I believe. And he worshiped Jesus. Now let's talk about that Son of Man issue. This is Daniel 7:13 through 14, and this is where that's the Son of Man that I'm referencing here. And Daniel's talking about a dream that he had one night, and he says, in my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a Son of Man. In other words, someone in recognizable human form. Coming with the clouds of heaven, he approached the Ancient of Days, which is Yahweh, obviously. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All people, nations, and men of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. Now, is he talking about a Jewish king? No Jewish kings were worshipped by all people. Okay? So this is clearly, this Son of Man is the Messiah. This is a human-formed individual who is worshipped as God at the right hand of Yahweh. So this is the Son of Man. And this is who Jesus is referencing. How do you know for sure? How do we know for sure that Jesus thinks of himself as that Son of Man? Do we have any evidence that Jesus, when he called himself Son of Man, he was talking about that Son of Man and not just the generic term, I'm just a lowly human? How do we know that? Well, this is from, I believe, Mark, the last chapter. And when Jesus is on trial, the high priest stood up and came forward and questioned Jesus, saying, do you not answer what it is that these men are testifying against you? But he kept silent and did not answer. Again, the priest was questioning him and saying to him, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One? And Jesus said, I am. And you shall see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven. Now that Son of Man sounds a whole lot like this Son of Man. What are the similarities? Well, he calls himself the Son of Man, and he's coming with the clouds of heaven. Duh! So it's pretty obvious. When Jesus calls himself the Son of Man, he says, I am the Daniel chapter 7 Son of Man, the one that's coming back to judge the earth. All right? And it's another passage here. Then Jesus told him, I have come to judge the world. I have come to give sight to the blind and to show those who think that they see that they are blind. So this is him talking. He's just picking up. This is from, obviously, John chapter 9. So now I'm thinking this is a private conversation. All along here, I'm thinking Jesus found this guy, pulled him aside, and says, do you believe in the Son of Man? He goes, yes, I believe, and he worships him. I'm thinking, this is private, okay? So Jesus told him, I have come to judge the world. I've come to give sight to the blind and to show those who think they see that they are blind. So when he's saying, I've come to give sight to the blind, and you're one of those guys, okay? So there you go. The Pharisees who were standing there heard him. I'm thinking, whoa, this is public. Didn't know that. That's kind of a shocker there, because you don't really get that picture at the beginning of the passage. So the Pharisees, they've been following this guy. So when Jesus found him, he's been kicked out of the synagogue. The Pharisees followed the guy outside. Okay, and maybe they were still badgering him. We don't know, but Jesus intervenes, and so they're standing around when Jesus is saying this stuff. The Pharisees who were standing there heard him and asked, are you saying we are blind? If you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty, Jesus replied. But you remain guilty because you claim you can see. All right, so that right there, you can see how they'd be upset with him now. All right, but one thing that this really, this is really an important miracle because of the gravity of it, because it is such a difficult thing, because it is so obviously a God thing. And the Pharisees, in order to maintain the position that he's not the Messiah, they cling religiously to this, you broke the Sabbath, therefore you cannot be Yahweh God, because that's like, that's one of the 10 commandments. Don't do anything on the Sabbath, and there you did. Now the problem is they are defining healing as work. You're right. And where do they get that? It's like they pull that out of their, what is this? You bring up a good point. How does this work? It's an action, but you were allowed to eat on the Sabbath. You were allowed to go to the bathroom on the Sabbath. And Jesus uses some logic and says, if you had a sheep that broke its leg or fell into a hole, wouldn't you pull it out on the Sabbath? What's wrong with you people? You made a religion out of this. You really have. And he says the Sabbath was not made for, God didn't make the man for the Sabbath. He made the Sabbath for man. He was trying to help you guys out. He made the Sabbath so that you would rest and not work yourself to death, because people can work themselves to death. And I don't want you to do that. I want you to have a happy, long life. I want you to have some downtime. And so I'm insisting because I want good for you. And you guys have turned it into this ridiculous, malicious religion where you kill people for doing a little bit on the Sabbath, and it's almost arbitrary now. So he's really attacking what they've done to the Sabbath. So he's a twofer. On the one hand, he's demonstrating his power. He's demonstrating that he's the Messiah. And he's unequivocally saying, I am the Messiah here again. Okay, so for anybody who's saying Jesus never claimed to be God, well, once again, here you go. Get around this. He claims it all the time. When he calls himself the Daniel 7 Son of Man, the one who comes with the clouds of heaven, he's kind of claiming divinity there. Kind of hard to get around that. Now, there is some controversy about those clouds. Are those real clouds, or are those clouds of angels? This is Matthew 24, verse 30. And then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. Now, what is that sign of the Son of Man? Some think it's going to be a big giant cross in the sky. Okay, in the series Left Behind, that's what it was, a big blazing cross that everybody in the world could see. I don't know. It could be, that's kind of his sign, so it's not unrealistic. All right, but when this sign appears, everybody on earth realizes that's Jesus. Jesus is the most famous individual on planet Earth. His prophecies came true. He is the central figure of all of Christianity and the Christian cults, and even Islam. Without Christianity, without Jesus, there would be no Islam. Okay, there's more references to Jesus than Muhammad in the Quran. Okay, so Jesus is when you take a look at the number of people that know about him and are influenced him, he is number one around the world. Okay, no other human. There's nobody that is even a close second. All right, and so when he comes back, we now live in a very post-Christian world, and it's rapidly becoming that. Our children and their children are very much, I mean, they might be aware of Jesus, but rapidly we've gone back to paganism at an incredibly fast pace. And so when he comes back, people are going to recognize that it's him, but they don't like him, just as they vilified Christians. I mean, now, because, I mean, they're doing everything they can to get, people are kind of sheep now, and so when they're watching their TV shows, any reference to somebody with traditional values were racist, sexist, homophobic, and therefore bad. And so, if somebody identifies themselves and stands up for their Christianity, immediately you're an evil, homophobic, racist individual. And that's kind of where things are going. And so Jesus, what they're trying to do is ultimately taint him. So when he comes back, they've actually been taught that bad is good and good is bad. And so this is, when he appears and they realize it is him, they're not going to be friendly toward that. This is going to be a very anti-Christian, hostile world. Okay? So they will mourn when they see that. When he comes on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory, and he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. And this particular passage is where people think that the clouds might be clouds of angels. Okay? Well, I think it could be both. I think he could be coming back with the clouds, and there'd be a bunch of angels with him, because clearly there are a bunch of angels with him. Here, we could have both. You see what I'm saying? All right. And Luke 24, when he had led them out of the vicinity of Bethany, he lifted up his hands and blessed them. And while he was blessing them, he left them and was taken up into heaven. And so some people say, well, what took him up? I'm thinking, well, he can appear. If this is after the resurrection, he can like appear and disappear at will for how many days afterwards? It was a long time. It was several weeks afterwards. He popped in and out. And so, 40 days. Okay, so why can't he fly? He does, but some people say he was taken up by those angels, and so those clouds were actually angels. In Acts 1, after he said this, he was taken up before their eyes, and a cloud hid him from their sight. They were looking intently up into the sky as he was going, when suddenly 2 men dressed in white stood beside them. Men of Galilee, they said, why do you stand there looking into the sky? This same Jesus, who has been taken from you into heaven, will come back the same way you have seen him go into heaven. And so he paints this picture. You saw him go up, 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 and then the clouds obscured him. What you're going to see is the clouds, and he's going to come out of those clouds. So again, are the clouds flocks of angels or actual clouds, or do we just see him surrounded by angels and both? So again, that's just one of those things. It's not a big deal controversy, but in your head, just as you think about this, I'm just trying to give you a mental picture of the process here. So when he describes himself in Daniel 7, when he's coming back, the Son of Man's coming back, he's going to appear in the same Jesus human form. Okay, and it's impressive when people have near-death experiences, that's what they see. They see Jesus in human form, but big and beautiful and very, very bright. But still, that humanity form he tends to retain. Okay? And then, this is kind of what we can expect. So the point is, if you think he's coming back on a certain day and there are no clouds in the sky, then you're wrong. Okay? Just keep that in mind.